Alrighty, so let's pick up now and start writing the code that we can access the values in these input fields. Oh, actually, there's one other thing. My bad. Actually, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to comment out these lines in the index or in the main.js because they're just creating output that's kind of, to me, making it busy right now. And the other one I needed in the HTML, and notice how I've changed mine to have them side by side, which I generally like. But the other thing I needed, and boy, is it a bad one to forget, it's called the button, right? So we're going to say submit. Right? So you need to have on the form a button that says submit. Just have this here. Cool. Good. Oh, now see, I want my button on the same line too. Okay, I'm gonna have to play with that because I like it there, but for now, this will work. So if I just hit submit here, what happens is even without me having action, notice what happens when you hit submit. Up here in the add URL, it'll actually say, it'll try to help send data over to a form somewhere. And there's a lot of security topics, and we'll probably definitely touch on some of them about forms and how we have to make sure we do something called sanitizing our forms input to make sure we're getting good input and not somebody trying to hack into our site, which absolutely can happen. But for today, right, we're here, we've got this. So now in our main.js up at the very top, there's something I want you to include, and not everybody does it this way, but I just find doing it this way makes it much easier. I'm going to set up a constant. I'm going to call it form, okay, element. I'm going to say it's equal to, all right, is it not like, let me finish it up. Okay, document dot query selector. Oh, sorry. Actually, I'm not going to write query selector because that's the one I wrote before when we were up here, when we were writing the get the DOM. Remember I showed you what the DOM is and the query selector, and I had a div there. But now, I want to show you another one, which is get element by ID. Yeah, it doesn't like it. Oh, is it the const it doesn't like? I swear I've written it that way before. Okay, we'll just call it form, capital FORM. Okay, so get element by ID, and now I have to specify that ID that I gave it over here. Okay, so I want to do this, I want to do this, input, or form input is what I called it, form dash input. Okay, so there's just a wonderful functionality that gets added to your web page when you say document, get element by ID, form specifying here. And let me show you what that is if I wrote it right. Okay. Let's see if I wrote it right. So what I have over here is I have my code breaking my breakpoint right on that first line where I've done the declaration of the constant. Remember how when we were talking about constants out in the global namespace, it's generally things you want to capitalize just so when you read code, it makes it easier to read that. So I'm going to go ahead and let it stop there at that first line. Okay. It is stopped there. So then I'm going to come down to here, or I could just roll my mouse over. Let's see if I got it. Let me let it run. And so rolling over that tells you from in your code now, you can reference form, and what it will do is it will reference that entire, everything that's within that form. Okay, so I could also come down here and type form. And when I do that, notice what happens. It says form and then gives me the ID. If I hit enter here, right, it shows me that entire structure now I have access to from this one variable, which is really helpful. Okay, and let me show you why. Because now I can type form dot, okay, miles. Oh, actually, let me stop for a minute. The name here, right, dot miles. Look at that. So what does that give me? Oh, I have tools. Now I have access to that input for miles. So now check this out. I can just type value and it'll give me whatever's in that value, whatever that user has inputted into there. So if I type 10, 100 doesn't matter. Okay. When I in JavaScript say, look at the form, which is this whole structure within the DOM, look specifically at miles, give me its value, right? Now it's a string. Don't worry about that right now. It gives me that value for whatever the user typed in. Okay. That is so great because there's different ways you'll see people do this. I typically try to do what's called minimalist. Like I don't want to write anything I'm not going to use. So then how would I, right, get gallons? Same way. Gallons dot value. So what it says is look inside of that DOM structure for gallons that I've given an ID to and give me its value. Again, there's nothing in there right now, right? If I do that, then it gives me whatever has been inputted into that value. Now we'll play with how to change these inputs and actually do something. Let's do that right now. Let's just go ahead and add a couple things to here. And actually, let me show you this. I'm going to hit submit. Watch what will happen when I hit submit. It'll actually then grab these values as well, which on a form, you don't want that to happen. It's just not something you want to happen. So we're going to talk about in the next video what's called an event listener, okay? Because we're going to listen for this submit and then we're going to change some default behavior. But before then, even before then, we can add some HTML that in each of these, it's called required, okay? Now, this is what I call minimum user validation. So imagine this is kind of what I was talking about before. You always want to, is it required? Is that right? Yeah, required. Anytime you're getting user input, you want to make sure you're validating that input and user form validation. Okay, so this is where you're going to stop. We're going to go over here, right? You're going to say, put in here, right? User form validation or form validation because it's a huge topic, okay, on the web. Form validation, client side form validation, just so much content you could consume. But this talks about, right, before submitting data to the server. Now, in this case, we're not going to submit to the server. Doesn't matter. Whenever you get user input, right, ensures that all the required forms are filled out in the correct format. This is called client-side validation. And it's like, you ever heard the term garbage in, garbage out? If you don't, and I know you all have been on forms before, meaning you filled out something and you were mad because of the way the form was badly, you probably didn't even think about badly handled as far as programming, but it is, okay? What is form validation, right? It's the most common way we do anything on the web today, and validating that, like the fields required. Now, this is why I was showing you this. Like at the very minimum, like if you did nothing else, this still isn't good enough, but it's at least better than nothing. All right, so let's go back here. All right, so in your notes, right? Do you have you had experiences with forms where you were mad about the way it was set up because it was hard to use, or just some general, feedback on forms? All right. So in this case, just putting the required in there, let's see if this works. Yeah, what this does is it says, okay, at minimum now, you have to enter this field. Now, by the way, it's not checking, right? The other check, and we will have to write these. Well, sometimes we don't have to write these manual. I can actually look. There is ways to see if these are numeric values. You can also limit them as well. So there's just some built-in JavaScript stuff you can do. But if I put something in there, then it moves to here. If I put something there, and then once I at least do required, meaning each of them is filled out, right? So at a bare minimum, we need to have the required attribute. So this is called an attribute in this input. Okay. By the way, I'm going to, for purposes of curiosity, I want to see what my formatting selection would do. Okay, didn't just move it over a little bit. I was wondering if it was going to put it on different lines, but it didn't. This formatting for me is fine. It kind of makes sense. Okay, so that's that part. So now we have what we need for the use. At least we have the fields. We'll go back and write some validation code for sure. We've at least got minimum validation. So now what we need to talk about is something called an event listener. And again, we're going to bring up the idea of a callback. Okay. So in this case, we're going to reference the form dot add event listener. Okay. And now in this case, this is, let's just write it. Okay. Open single quote submit. So we're listening for a submit. When that submit happens, we're going to have again, a callback. So whenever it hears a submit, then it's going to do something. We're going to capture an E, which is the event itself. And then we're going to run this code. And the code in this case, right, is the E. All right. Let's see if this, oh, I did that kind of fast. You could pause it, but that's right now. Let's see if I wrote it right. Okay. I'm going to come over here. And now I'm going to bring, my code is really getting kind of small because my screen is small. Let's let this run through, right? So at this point, I'm not getting anything on the console because this code that we wrote is just waiting for, it's listening. So the browser is listening for, okay? And I'm going to put a breakpoint right here because I want it to, as soon as we hit, because it's listening for submit, and there's a lot of different things the browser can listen for, but right now it's submit. Okay. When I hit submit, if I have data in here, okay, when I hit submit, then this now is what is going to happen when we hit submit. And if you go look at E real quick, okay, you can see that there is all of this content that you get for the E. And actually, the other one is E dot target. We'll look at this one in a minute. So the target of my submit is a form. That's how you kind of look at that. Okay. Target dot value, right? And in this case, there's no, because we'd want to specify, right? In this case, we could do miles. Oh, DevTools, sometimes you make me crazy, right? So I could, in this case, the target value. Now, it's the same as what we looked before when we said form. Okay, when we said form dot miles dot value. Okay, it's still the same one. But typically inside of an event listener, there's other reasons you'd want to reference things by the event itself. Okay, so we're actually, believe it or not, close to having some input that is going to create some output on the page just by this right here. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to think for a minute, and in your README file, before I show you, what would we want to do inside of this event listener? What's going to happen? Think about it. When a user hits submit, what do we want to do? What code do we want to run when the user hits submit? I want you to think about it. I want you to, and it's okay, don't look at my next video because the next video I'm going to show you. But I just want you to give it some thought because I'm guessing some of you, several of you, maybe none of you, can see it already. Because if we're listening for an event, what's the event we're listening for? We're getting miles, gallons, and price from the user. Well, when we have those three values, what is it that we want to do in code? All right, do that, and then I'll pick you up on the next one.